I think it's going to be
Check
great.
it out. That's cool.
I'm going to watch it. Everybody watch it. Starts next week.
Next week.
What's the date?
I don't know the date. You'll hear all about it.
All right. We'll keep plugging it. Thanks to Terry Shepard, Stephen Baldwin, the 7th graders from Our Lady of the Hampton School in New York, Catherine, Paris, studio audience. Greg Gutfeld, I love you, America.
And we start with the Fox News alert topping the hour tonight. Democratic Senator Al Franken speaking publicly for the first time since he was accused of sexual misconduct. The senator giving several interviews to Minnesota media outlets in his state. Franken saying that he will return to Capitol Hill, he says, ashamed and embarrassed, back to work tomorrow. He also says he hopes to regain the trust of his constituents. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new hour of America's News Headquarters. I'm Eric Shawn.
And I'm Arthel Neville. Senator Franken breaks his 8-day silence to apologize to his accusers and says he will now focus on helping other victims of sexual harassment.
I believe it will pass, Chris. I think that in the end, and we have members who are expressing what are legitimate concerns, who have ideas about how to make the bill stronger and better, and we're certainly open to those, and we're going to have an open process on the floor of the United States Senate where people can offer amendments. Those amendments can get debated and voted upon. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to change the bill in the direction that some of our senators want to see.
And we have complete team coverage on this continuing story tonight. Let's start with Molly Hinneberg, who is live in Washington. So, Molly, Senator Franken is taking responsibility, he says, for what these 4 women are saying. But is he admitting what some of them are accusing him of, which is that he groped them?
Well, Arthel, he said he would never, quote, intentionally do that. Senator Franken says he will come back to work tomorrow and says this has been a, quote, shock to him that women have accused him of groping them.
I'm someone who, hugs people. And I've learned from these stories that in some of these encounters, I've crossed a line for some women.
Franken says he will cooperate fully with an ethics investigation, but will not step down from his Senate seat. Arthel.
And then Congressman Conyers, he didn't want to step down from his leadership role, so talk about why he made the decision to do so.
Right. Michigan Democratic Congressman John Conyers said he didn't want to be a distraction to his colleagues. This also gives House Democrats some political cover as the House Ethics Committee looks into Conyers and allegations by members of his staff that he sexually harassed them and may have used taxpayer dollars to keep the allegations quiet. So he's reluctantly stepping down as the top Democrat on the powerful House Judiciary Committee. In a statement today, Conyers said, quote, I very much look forward to vindicating myself and my family before the House Committee on Ethics. To be clear, I would like very much to remain as ranking member. I cannot, in good conscience, he continues, allow these charges to undermine my colleagues in the Democratic caucus and my friends on both sides of the aisle in the Judiciary Committee and the House of Representatives. Before Conyers announced he was stepping down, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi called him a, quote, icon who has, quote, done a great deal to protect women. But she also believed that he would, quote, do the right thing in this situation. Arthel.
Molly Hinneberg, thank you very much, Molly. Eric?
Arthel, Senator Franken, of course, not the only political figure who's been embroiled in accusations of sexual misconduct. As you know, Alabama Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore, well, he is still denying those claims against him, and he is vowing to stay in the race despite calls from some of his fellow Republicans on the national stage to drop out. But President Trump is not one of those. He's not urging him to leave the race. The president, in fact, taking to Twitter to attack Moore's Democratic opponent further. That man, of course, Doug Jones. Marianne Rafferty, live in Los Angeles tonight with the latest on this contest. Hi, Marianne.
Hi, Eric. Just before Auburn pulled off a big win against the Crimson Tide, Democrat Doug Jones was busy campaigning tailgate style. He used the big Iron Bowl rivalry to remind voters there that he needs their support to pull off his own win against Roy Moore.
I think we're going to win. That's all I know. We've got a really great, I mean, there are just thousands of supporters that have come out to work for this campaign. We've been talking about all the issues that matter to people from the day one. You get sidetracked on other things, but we've been talking about the economy. We've been talking about health care. Those are the issues that people care about the most, and it's resonated with folks.
President Trump also weighing in on the important Senate race, which could have an impact on the GOP's plan for tax reform, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. The president tweeting earlier today, quote, "I endorsed Luther Strange in the Alabama primary. He shot way up in the polls, but it wasn't enough. Can't let Schumer Pelosi win the race. Liberal Jones would be bad." By bad, he could be referring to the fact that a Jones win would mean an even narrower margin for Republicans in the Senate, which currently stands at 51-49. Now, despite the possible loss of a Senate seat in Alabama, Republicans are forging on, hoping to push through the tax reform bill before the end of the year. Meanwhile, we haven't seen much of Roy Moore the past couple of days in the wake of sexual harassment allegations, but he does have plans to hold a rally tomorrow in Fort Payne, Alabama. This is going to be the first one since November 16th, when he didn't allow any questions from the media about the allegations against him. We'll see if he addresses those tomorrow. Eric?
Yeah, that should be interesting. Back on the campaign trail. Marianne, thank you. Right, Thel?
And yeah, for more on this now, Eric, we're going to be joined by Lauren Cooley, Red Alert Politics section editor of the Washington Examiner. Lauren, hi. So let's start with Congressman Conyers. What are we hearing about it? Talk more about how this unfolded, and perhaps maybe it's still too quiet in D.C. tonight to get any reaction there.
Right, so we just have another member of elected official coming out and basically saying there are accusations of sexual assault, sexual harassment, but he didn't do it. But at the same time, what we're seeing is that he's stepping down from his leadership position, but not stepping down from serving in office. And so the real question here is, to me, this stepping down from your leadership position but not stepping down from office is like when your kid says, oh, you know, you take away my Xbox for a week, but don't ground me from going to that big party on the weekend, right? It's either you did it or you didn't. Either you deserve to step down completely or you didn't do anything at all and you shouldn't be punished. And so we're going to see the wake of that in the next few days. But it's a quiet weekend. We're trying to figure out what exactly does that mean?
Well, we still have to see how this all plays out. I mean, these are horrible allegations, and it's rocking Congress now. And you have the House Ethics Committee. They're going to investigate allegations against Congressman John Conyers, and the Senate mate is doing the same in the Senator Franken case. How might this new crisis tie up and already clog Congress even more?
Yeah, so obviously Congress has been slow to act this legislative season, and I think that now it's just going to put more hysteria on the drama of politics and not necessarily the policy making. It definitely is also going to play into the elections in 2018 and special elections with Roy Moore. But I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to voters deciding when you're electing someone, are you electing them to represent you on policy issues, or are you electing someone to represent you on, you know, personal values and the way they live out their life? And it's something that we're seeing may not always be compatible between your personal values, living it out in your life, and your policy values, the way that a representative may vote on the floor.
You're right. These allegations are very personal. They're going to get very political, very fast, with an eye on November 2018. How will lawmakers punish, when and where warranted, and excuse in cases of valid vindication?
Right, so some would argue that there already is a way to punish them. It's the Ethics Commission. It's, by paying off essentially women or men who have come forward in alleged harassment. But I think what we're seeing now in public discourse is that that's not enough. Ethics commissions takes a long time. It gets tied up. It gets swept under the rug.
But I think now that this is happening, we're in a new day, a new time, and I think that they are going to be thorough, but they're going to work expeditiously. Listen, before we go, in Alabama, we've got the Senate candidate there, Roy Moore, with a different set of allegations involving sexual misconduct with teenage girls. Moore is still in the race. President Trump supporting him as recent as this morning. There's mixed feelings inside the Republican Party about Mr. Trump supporting Moore. Talk about that for us.
Yeah, so the interesting thing here is I want to make a comparison between in 2016 during the election, the Access Hollywood tapes came out. And basically voters had to look and say, am I going to look past those tapes to, vote for someone who represents maybe my policy values, or am I going to stay home or vote for Hillary Clinton? And in general, we saw people went ahead and voted for Donald Trump. That's why he's our president today.
Yeah, and again,
so it may not
listen,
be the same.
Everybody is innocent until proven otherwise. But, it is a separate case. Mr. Trump at the time, candidate Trump, those tapes came out. They were involving women. Certainly, any sort of unwanted advances sexually are unacceptable. But, the Moore case is alleged to have involved teenage girls.
Sure. And so, again, it's not a comparison between President Trump and Roy Moore, but I think the voter reaction may be very similar, where we see people who completely disagree with the allegations against Roy Moore. They're going to go and vote for him anyway because they believe that, he's the one that holds their values and policy, whether that's pro-life or that's religious liberty. And I think it's a difficult thing for Alabama voters to have to deal with, but that's the place we're in right now because he wasn't vetted well enough, I guess, in the primary process.
Lauren Cooley, we leave it there. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, it's coming down to the wire for Republican lawmakers and President Trump when they look to complete their unfinished business with just about 1 month to go in the year. Much of the focus and the work is going to be on tax reform. The Senate gearing up for a vote likely this week. Well, Senate Finance Committee member, Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota, he told Chris Wallace this morning on Fox News Sunday that he does have faith in the bill.
I believe it will pass, Chris. I think that in the end, and we have members who are expressing what are legitimate concerns, who have ideas about how to make the bill stronger and better, and we're certainly open to those, and we're going to have an open process on the floor of the United States Senate where people can offer amendments. Those amendments can get debated and voted upon. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to change the bill in the direction that some of our senators want to see.
Tonight, take a look at Marine One. It is at Joint Base Andrews, waiting for the arrival of the president as they fly in Air Force One from Florida. And that is where Phil Keating is, in West Palm Beach, near the president's Mar-a-Lago estate, of course, where the president and the first family spent this Thanksgiving weekend. And now he's going to face, taxes, controversy, and everything else once he gets back to the White House, Phil.
Yeah, it's back to the grind in the Beltway. At about 4:30 Eastern time, that is when the president, his family, and staff all aboard Air Force One lifted off from West Palm Beach International Airport after spending what appears to have been just simply a great extended Thanksgiving holiday weekend here at Palm Beach. Every day, the president was active. He made a couple of phone calls internationally to some other presidents. He also tweeted every day, and he also golfed every day. And the weather was, of course, absolutely spectacular. His last tweet from Palm Beach County came actually aboard Air Force One on the tarmac. Quote, "Since the first day I took office, all you hear is the phony Democrat excuse for losing the election. Russia, Russia, Russia. Despite this, I have the economy booming and have possibly done more than any 10-month president. Make America great again." And then it was wheels up, departing Palm Beach, Florida, and flying back to Washington at what should be a big week ahead for his top legislative priority right now, signing a tax cut and tax reform package into law. Politico reporting that tomorrow, Trump will lunch with the Senate Finance Committee talking about the tax package. And on Tuesday, President Trump will, for the very first time, attend the weekly GOP policy luncheon, working with senators on getting them to pass their version of the tax cut bill. Also Tuesday, the Big Four legislative leaders will meet with Trump at the White House to hammer out a way, hopefully, to avoid a December government shutdown. But as the president told the troops on Thanksgiving Day, his top priority is this.
Now we're working on tax cuts, big, fat, beautiful tax cuts. And hopefully we'll get that, and then you're going to really see things happen.
It is going to get done. It has to get done for the American people. It's less about the politics of the timing. It's more about that this president's begun to turn this economy around.
Now, this was the first time President Trump and the first family spent the weekend at Mar-a-Lago down here on Palm Beach. It had been 7 months since they were last here. But over the winter months, just as he did last year, President Trump is expected to spend several weekends at Mar-a-Lago at his winter White House. The most pressing one or urgent one or soonest one we could think of right now would be perhaps the Christmas, New Year's big week right in Palm Beach, where the weather should be spectacular. And again, Air Force One should be landing at Joint Base Andrews really in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, well, Phil, thanks. We'll take a look at that when the president arrives. He had a full plate in Thanksgiving, and he's got a full plate of issues facing him in the Oval Office tomorrow morning. Phil Keating tonight in West Palm. Thanks. All right, though.
And meanwhile, Eric, there are new developments in the special counsel's Russia probe. Why is former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn cutting off contact with the White House? Plus, the former Joint Chiefs of Staff now sounding the alarm about the threat from North Korea. National security expert Christopher Swift joins us to discuss the potential for a nuclear conflict. President Trump's former national security advisor is cutting off contact with the White House. Lawyers for Michael Flynn recently notifying Trump's legal team they can no longer discuss the special counsel probe into Russian election meddling. That could be a sign that Flynn is cooperating with federal prosecutors or negotiating a deal. Garrett Tinney is live in Washington with more. Hey, Garrett.
Hey, Arthel. It's important to remember at this point, Michael Flynn has not been formally charged with any crimes, but we do know that he remains one of the primary persons of interest in the special counsel's investigation. For months now, Flynn's lawyers have had an information sharing agreement with President Trump's legal team, and that's to help both sides stay abreast of special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. That agreement ended earlier this week, though, when General Flynn's attorneys informed their counterparts that they can no longer participate. And sources close to the investigation tell Fox News Flynn is now likely cooperating with Mueller's investigation or trying to cut a deal for his cooperation or possibly preparing to plead guilty to forthcoming charges in order to protect his son, who is also under investigation by Mueller's team. Now, if in fact Flynn is cooperating, legal experts say there are all kinds of questions that he may be able to answer.
The kinds of things that Michael Flynn can talk about include conversations he had with the president, not only about Turkey, but also about the president's interactions with Jim Comey, the firing of Jim Comey, and by the way, also all sorts of things that we may not know about, and they could include other cabinet officials.
The president's legal team tells us they have been expecting that Flynn would eventually be facing charges and that they're not surprised he may be entering a plea. However, they argue any charges that he may be facing will likely stem from his work with Turkey and are not related to his contacts with Russia or with the Trump campaign. Arthel?
Yeah, and Garrett, as we're discussing this topic right now, we're looking at live pictures there at Joint Base Andrews, Air Force One touching down there. The president, ending officially his Thanksgiving Day weekend there in Florida. Back to business. This is one of the many things on the president's plate as he's back in D.C. or heads back to the White House. Garrett Tinney, you still there?
Hey, Arthel, I got you.
Yeah, so, are you hearing anything in terms of, we already see that Trump's legal team is saying, listen, we're going to stay the course. We are expecting this thing to wrap up quickly. There's no hysteria here. Business as usual.
Yeah, essentially, this is nothing, no surprises here for the president's legal team. We know this is one facet of the special counsel's investigation. We also know that amongst the White House team, amongst his advisors, that his attorneys, Ty Cobb, has said he believes the special counsel will will wrap up its interviews with the White House team shortly after Thanksgiving. So that's expected to happen either this week or in the coming weeks ahead. And they said that shortly after that, he believes the special counsel should be coming to a close with this investigation. As we've seen with Michael Flynn, possibly cooperating with special counsel Robert Mueller's team, it shows no signs that that investigation is anywhere coming to a close. In fact, expanding. We know the investigators there with the FBI are now looking into Michael Flynn's work for Turkey, specifically a project working on an unfinished documentary that was targeting one of Turkey's president's political rivals that is here in the U.S. And over $500,000 he got paid for that. That was undisclosed until March of this year. That is one facet they are looking at to see who it is that he worked with on this project. Were these payments undisclosed? What other connections does he have to foreign national governments? And all of this being after he started working with the Trump campaign and been announced as national security advisor.
Yeah, boy, so many big issues facing the president this week with so little time left in this year. As we look here at Joint Base Andrews, waiting for the president to get off Air Force One and head back to the White House. We'll toss it over to you in the meantime, Eric.
Well, for more on what this means as we wait the president to deplane, let's bring in Christopher Swift. He's professor of national security studies at Georgetown University, a national security attorney in Washington. So, Chris, you know, Flynn, as we know, had sat with Putin at that RT dinner in Moscow. We had those secret contacts with Ambassador Kislyak. Now, as we just heard, his foreign lobbying for Turkey is apparently under the microscope. So as a national security lawyer, do you see any laws broken?
Well, there's certainly some difficulties with the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA, which basically requires anybody, regardless of whether they're a lawyer or a lobbyist or a media outlet or even a professor, to register with the Attorney General and identify the fact that they're taking money from a foreign government and advocating on behalf of a foreign government.
But is that small potatoes compared to, you know, collusion or espionage or the allegations that we've heard of, like selling out your country?
You know, so if you look at those allegations and you look at the way things are actually charged in court, the FARA violations are one of the ways that the U.S. government will pursue espionage-like charges against somebody without having to disclose the secret information that would be necessary in order to bring a true espionage charge. So FARA is sort of like a lesser violation that's easier to prove without having to go to secret evidence.
Well, a lesser violation, as you say, could potentially be money from Turkey not reporting that.
That's right.
As is alleged. His attorney said there's been no wrongdoing. But look what the Wall Street Journal reported recently, pretty astounding, about the Turkish cleric who is opposed to the president there. They said, quote, Mr. Flynn and his son, Michael Flynn Jr., were to be paid as much as $15 million for delivering Fethullah Gulen to the Turkish government, according to people with knowledge of the discussions that they had. They had a dinner at the 21 Club, supposedly, where they discussed this. I mean, that sounds like they would, what, kidnap the guy? There was allegations of a private jet that were involved. I mean, is that even potentially true? His lawyer denies it, calls it outrageous, and I'll have you answer as we see the first family, the first couple, descend from the steps of Air Force One.
Well, look, let's focus on the facts that we know. We know that Lieutenant General Flynn at one point was representing the government of Turkey in various capacities on various projects. We know that he had a legal duty to register with the Attorney General as a foreign agent because he was working for the Turkish government, and we know that he failed to do so. If you put those three things together, you have a violation of the law, and that's something that Director Mueller could use as leverage against the former National Security Advisor Flynn to get him to testify about things he might know or might not know about what the Trump campaign was doing with respect to Russia.
And if they squeeze him on that, could then he flip and turn and testify for the prosecution on something else?
Yes, definitely. And that's the way it usually works in these cases. Look, whenever you're a defendant or a potential target in an investigation, you like to communicate with all the other defendants and potential targets to be able to figure out what's going on, where the government might be going with their case, what issues are likely to implicate you, and what issues you don't need to worry about. The minute somebody stops collaborating or cooperating under that penumbra or that umbrella of common interest, that's a sign that they're heading for trouble. They might be heading for an indictment, and that's the point at which a prosecutor, a skilled prosecutor, will try to flip that person over and turn them from being a target in one investigation to being a witness going in an investigation targeting an even bigger fish.
And you think that's happening now?
I think it's likely that that's happening now.
You talked about the foreign agent and registering as a foreign agent. There's been a big tit for tat between Moscow and us. Putin now calling American media companies and others in Moscow foreign agents. This in response to the Department of Justice labeling RT, the Russian television network, as a foreign agent. Is there an equivalence in your view between RT and news organizations?
Well, look, RT is a news organization that is both funded by and directed by the Russian government. If you compare that kind of an entity with an entity like Fox News, which is not part of a government and not directed by a government, you can't draw any kind of equivalency. To the extent that the Russian government has been using this new law that they've passed to target American media. It's been U.S. government-funded media that is still independent, still has independent editorial policy. That's very different from RT, which is essentially the English language mouthpiece for Vladimir Putin's regime. And look, if you look at the other Russian media that, operates in the United States and reports from the United States, they haven't been asked by the Justice Department to register as foreign agents because even though they might be state-funded, by the Russian government, they have independent editorial policy. That independent element is the crucial one, and that's what we need to look at here.
The English language mouthpiece for Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin and his policy, I mean, they're here. Let me show you some photos. Last night, I'm walking home, and there's Ed Schultz. Ed is a liberal talk show host, used to be on MSNBC, right? Had his own program. Now he's on RT, and they say that, is this America enough for you? That's what it says. Is this American enough for you? They are Americans, obviously, but they're working for RT. So earlier on America's News Headquarters, I asked former Ambassador John Bolton if RT is slammed as a foreign agent, should the people who work there, even if they're Americans, should they be held responsible too? And this is what Ambassador Bolton said.
If you're working for a registered foreign agent and as he is active on air, it may well be under the new expansive interpretation he should register as a foreign agent.
I mean, so should Ed Schultz and the others there, should they register as a foreign agent? How far does this go?
Well, look, if it was a law firm or a lobbying shop, each individual that's carrying water on behalf of a foreign government would be required under the law to register as a foreign agent. So if you or I were suddenly to take, a consulting contract from the Queen of England, you and I would be required to go down to the Department of Justice and register. So the question isn't what they are or who they're representing. The question is, what are they doing? If they're representing a foreign government, they need to disclose that fact so it's apparent to not just the U.S. government, but to anybody that may be on the receiving end of any advocacy that they're doing.
Well, that channel's on your TV screen, there on your box. You can click right over it and see what they're saying. Christopher Swift, as we watch Marine One get ready to take off from Joint Base Andrews to then land softly on the lawn of the White House as the president returns to his work. We thank you. We thank you for your insight tonight.
Good to be with you.
Of course. Right, Thal?
And we'll keep watching. When we come back, we're going to talk about this as well, a factory explosion in China. This video showing the aftermath, what we know about the deadly blast, and the latest on the mosque massacre in Egypt. Today, Americans and worshipers around the world condemning the attack.
There is no point you can make by killing people, especially when people are worshiping in their religious places. It connects back to the Texas shooting we had recently. People who are worshiping, killing them doesn't make any point.
It's very sad, it's pathetic, it's unhumanitic. It doesn't represent any sort of Islamic principles or Islamic faith. Islam doesn't allow anyone to kill, anyone to harm.
Email bombshell.
Had the information been released, there would have been harm to national security.
As a federal watchdog, he knew everything about the classified documents. Now, Monday, Charles McCullough speaks out for the first time inside the real risks of her private server and the personal threats if Hillary was held accountable.
But we would be the first two to be fired with her administration.
Now, hear it all.
What should the American public know about those 22 top secret Clinton emails?
The exclusive interview you can't afford to miss, only on Tucker Carlson Tonight.
Time now for some headlines. A deadly factory explosion today in a port city south of Shanghai. The blast leveling vacant buildings nearby and damaging cars. At least 2 people killed, more than 30 others hurt. Police are investigating. Pakistani Islamists holding protests in the capital Islamabad today, demanding the law minister resign because he left out the name the Prophet Muhammad in the wording of a new law. The minister apologizing, calling it a clerical error. And a volcano erupting several times in Bali, Indonesia last night, shooting thick smoke and steam more than 4 miles into the air. As a result, many flights to the popular tourist destination have been canceled.
Well, now to the latest on that horrible, deadly mosque attack in Egypt. The assault, a terrorist attack during Friday prayers, killed 305 people. Those terrorists were told wearing military uniforms and carrying the ISIS flag. Villager security officials now saying that ISIS did warn the community months ago not to collaborate with Egyptian security forces. Connor Powell tonight has the latest from Jerusalem.
Erica, as Egyptians mark a weekend of mourning for the 305 people killed on Friday, Egyptian authorities now getting a better picture of what exactly happened in the small village of Bir al-Abed. According to village locals, ISIS militants have regularly threatened the moderate Sufi Muslim community, warning them not to cooperate with Egyptian security forces. Sufi Muslims are despised by extremists and viewed by groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS as apostates. Around noon on Friday, more than 24 well-armed militants waving ISIS flags attacked the Al-Rada Mosque, first setting off a bomb and then gutting down many of the 500 or so worshippers who were trying to flee to safety.
The assailants were targeting anybody and everybody, anybody who was breathing.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi vowed this weekend that the attack would not go unpunished. And the Egyptian military launched airstrikes in the mountains of the Sinai Desert. For 3 years, President Sisi has promised to end the wave of violence unleashed by ISIS. This attack shows just how easily ISIS, though, is able to operate in the Sinai Desert, and just how ineffective Egyptian security forces are. Eric?
All right, Connor, thanks so much. And for more on this, you can go to foxnews.com, check out the Fox News Rundown podcast. They got a little link on foxnews.com. My guest tomorrow will be Ambassador Dennis Ross. That's available tomorrow morning, the new Fox News Rundown podcast. Arthel?
Eric, Michael Flynn's legal team no longer sharing information with the president's lawyers about special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. What could have caused the sudden separation? We'll talk about that ahead. And the Navy confirming the deaths of an officer and 2 sailors after a plane crash in the Philippine Sea. What we're learning about those men and about that crash. Lawmakers are getting back to work tomorrow after their Thanksgiving recess, now looking to chip away at a lengthy to-do list with just a month left in 2017. That includes averting a government shutdown, tax reform, and immigration. Caroline Shively in Washington with more on Congress's end-of-the-year agenda.
Sometimes Congress just creaks along at a slow pace, and sometimes they ram things through at lightning speed. Judging by their agenda, Republican leaders are planning on some lightning. In the next few weeks, they may vote on taxes, the individual mandate, health care for kids, sexual harassment, and oh yeah, the entire federal government will shut down if they don't pass a spending resolution. The Senate votes on tax reform this week. The House has already passed its version.
I predict we will have a new tax code for the new year and for a new era of American prosperity. We deserve it. Americans deserve a new tax code.
They are doing something that's going to increase the debt enormously. It's going to be a job killer, and it's going to raise taxes on the middle class, and that has a big impact on the individual lives of all Americans.
Democrats are pushing to amend the spending bill, allowing Dreamers to stay. Those are illegal immigrants who came here as minors. Republicans want it handled separately.
We have a fixable priority in the DREAM Act, a bipartisan solution to this problem to make sure that these young people have a chance to earn their way into citizenship. We can do this, and we can get it done before the end of the year.
But it shouldn't be dealt with in the context of a year-end spending bill, and the Democrats using it and trying to use leverage to, to shut down the government. That's not how this ought to be resolved.
Republican leaders say they aren't afraid to keep members here past their scheduled holiday break to finish their work. Arthel?
Caroline Shively in Washington. Thank you.
Well, Austin Flake is the son of Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, and he's filing a lawsuit against former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio. The suit claims that Arpaio tried to ruin his father's political career when the controversial sheriff pursued animal cruelty charges against Austin and his ex-wife. Was it political revenge, as he claims, or legitimate prosecution? Joining us now is defense attorney Richard St. Paul, who's also a member of the Republican Lawyers Association, and Keisha Hebban, a defense attorney and former prosecutor. So bear with me, guys. You got Austin and his ex-wife, Logan. Her parents run this kennel. The air conditioning breaks one night, right? And 21 dogs die of heat exhaustion. And Sheriff Joe then charges him with animal cruelty charges. Austin says it's politically motivated. What do you think?
Look, I think it's up to a jury, because what happened is that initially the charges were filed against